Jon Stewart, of course, is back, as you guys have covered here, Krystal, and he has some thoughts on Tucker Carlson. What's Jon Stewart been up to in his return to The Daily Show?
Yeah, so first of all, last week, of course, he went after Joe Biden, also Donald Trump, for his age. That created a whole insane freak out. So he started off by responding a bit to his critics and then making a turn into the Tucker Carlson criticism. Let's start with him hitting back at his critics from last week's show.
Quite frankly, the response to the first show last Monday was universally glowing.
Jon Stewart is facing massive backlash from Democrats over his comments about Joe Biden. Olbermann tweeted, well, after 9 years away, there's nothing else to say to the both side is fraud Jon Stewart bashing Biden, except please make it another 9 years. Christy Jackson tweeted, sorry, but I won't be watching you either.
Okay. Maybe not universal. But that was on Twitter. Everything on Twitter gets a backlash. I've seen Twitter tell labradoodles to go themselves. Labradoodles. I just think it's better to deal head on with what's an apparent issue to people. I mean, we're just talking here.
And Mary Trump tweeting, not only is Stewart's both sides are the same rhetoric not funny, it's a potential disaster for democracy.
It's one show. It was just one show. It was 20 minutes. I did 20 minutes of one show. But I guess, as the famous saying goes, democracy dies in discussion.
So the Mary Trump one, we covered that last week, was insanely deranged. Like, even that one quote doesn't do it justice. But clearly he is not too concerned about people who did not appreciate his original show.
It's such a good flashback to the Bush era when we had to, like, we were all fighting over the, like, dog bone that is Jon Stewart and whether or not he was destroying democracy. Meanwhile, it's since become obviously apparent that we have a bigger fish to fry when it comes to the preservation of the lowercase American democracy, Krystal. It just feels like such a weird time warp to be debating once again along the lines of what Mary Trump and Keith Olbermann are doing.
Yeah, that's so true. Keith Olbermann, who is still holding on to like the MSNBC show he had in like 2002 or whatever. So
like the sanctimonious, the intellectual. It's just so stupid. And you remember the moral panics over, at the time it was millennials, like college students who, it was a decent number said that they got their news from The Daily Show. And there were repeatedly moral panics over what a crisis this was for lowercase d democracy, that people were getting their news from The Daily Show. And meanwhile, coming down the pipe in 10 years was like TikTok. So well done, everyone. You really warned us that this would be a disaster. And everyone took appropriate measures and decided to join TikTok.
So the bit that he then turned to is he's like, all right, I got to learn how to be more of a shameful propagandist. So who can I take notes from? And then he pulls up the Tucker interview with Putin and makes this turn into going after Tucker, not only for that interview, but also for his like exploits around Moscow, where he's like, look at the subway, look at the grocery store, isn't this incredible? Leaving out the fact that the groceries may be cheaper, but also the wages are way, way lower than in the US. Let's take a look at a bit of that commentary.
How does Russia have a subway station that normal people use to get to work and home every single day that's nicer than anything in our country? There's no graffiti, there's no filth, there are no foul smells. We were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And coming to a Russian grocery store, the heart of evil, and seeing what things cost and how people live, it will radicalize you against our leaders. That's how I feel anyway, radicalized.
Radicalized. And it will radicalize you unless you understand basic economics. See, $104 for groceries sounds like a great bargain unless you realize Russians earn less than $200 a week. Right. Because the difference between our urinal-caked, chaotic subways and your candelabraed, beautiful subways is the literal price of freedom. But the goal that Carlson and his ilk are pushing is that there's really no difference between our systems. In fact, theirs might be a little bit better. The question is, why? Why is Tucker doing this? Here's why. It's because the old civilizational battle was communism versus capitalism. That's what drove the world since World War II. Russia was the enemy then. But now they think the battle is woke versus unwoke. And in that fight, Putin is an ally to the right. He's their friend. Unfortunately, he is also a brutal and ruthless dictator. So now they have to make Americans a little more comfortable with that. I mean, liberty is nice, but have you seen Russia's shopping carts? And Tucker would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling assassins.
In a statement to the New York Times, Carlson said, quote, "It is horrifying what happened to Navalny. The whole thing is barbaric and awful. No decent person would defend it."
Correct. No decent person would.
So what do you think of that part, Emily? I felt like actually this week it was the turn of the right to be like really outraged by what Jon Stewart had to say. I know they didn't like in particular when he says that thing about like our dirty subways are the price of freedom.
Yeah, because, you know, I think that there were the Tucker Putin interview. And Ryan and I talked about this a lot, and so did you and Sagar. I thought that interview was defensible. I think what happened afterwards in the grocery store and in the subway was mostly silly, but I do think people have been sort of willfully misinterpreting what Tucker Carlson was saying about the subways, which is, you know, I heard a lot of people being like, Russia is poorer than the poorest U.S. state, Mississippi. And I think the point is, right. So why doesn't, you know, Mississippi have glistening infrastructure? If we're that much wealthier, why can't we also have our cake and eat it too? Why not both? Which I think is an entirely legitimate question. That said, you know, Tucker and Jon Stewart have a storied history. Like one of the famous moments of both of their career involves each other. When Jon Stewart, you know, told Tucker Carlson that Crossfire on air, Tucker was interviewing Jon Stewart with, I think it was Paul Begala around 2000, that Crossfire was destroying democracy, sort of the same attack that Mary Trump made against him, but he was making it against the sort of performative and theatrical debates that happened on CNN via Crossfire. I actually think Jon Stewart was wrong in that. I think it's great to have, you know, political theater because it allows us, it's a catharsis, it's a cultural catharsis. That said, the two of them do have history, so it's not surprising at all that Jon Stewart's like one of his first big swings back at The Daily Show, which, by the way, he is such a distinct host that nobody else could do it. I think it's very clear that nobody else can own The Daily Show property like Jon Stewart can, and, you know, occasionally be hilarious. Like, there's some really good moments in his approach to Tucker's, or his points against Tucker's exploration of the Russian grocery store and subway system, because it was so rife for a takedown. And so, yeah, Krystal, all I can say is, honestly, I'm glad that he gave up what he was doing for Apple, because I found it to be sort of insufferable, and this is a much better version of Jon Stewart. I wish Stephen Colbert would do the same thing.
I liked some of what he did with Apple, especially, I mean, he did these very serious interviews with people who were just like, oh, Jon Stewart's going to interview me. Sure, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, I'll sit down with you, you know, and then he's actually a phenomenal interviewer and would hold their feet to the fire and gives zero fucks, apparently, about them caring, you know, liking him or whatever. So there were moments that I thought were great in the Apple show, but he left because of censorship. And so I really admire that. It's great to have him back on Monday nights. I'm sure, you know, there have already been moments where I don't agree with him. That's fine. I don't have to agree with every word that this comedian is saying. It's not, you know.
Yes, you do, Krystal.
Serious, guys. But, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't even put together that Crossfire callback that this going after Tucker now actually represents. So that is kind of perfect in a certain sense.
It really is. It's like full circle moment.
Yeah, indeed.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.